Welcome to the Toolshed. We're so glad you're here this morning. It's Thursday. That means one thing. It's all about training. All the questions you have, we're going to cover in the Toolshed this morning. The Toolshed, the international Toolshed, brought to you by our good friends at Schedule Engine. And of course, as every episode, we're so grateful for our team at Emerson that is making this whole thing possible for you. And today, because the questions were really good, we wanted to get you good answers, and the best way we knew how to do that was to bring our good friend, Brian Donovan. How are you?
Hey.
Thanks for coming to the shed.
So happy to be back.
I know, it's like we're doing it. We talked about it, and if you didn't catch last week's episode, Brian is someone that spends every day working with contractors, talking about training, results of training, thinking about training, and that's really what we want to do with this episode. We want to help you think through, consider us your mastermind group for all things training. We've got one of the best in the country at it, and Jerry and I are doing our best to catch up and keep up, but we're here for you, and we're going to ask some of the questions with Brian. We're just going to have a chat about some of the things that Jerry and I get asked a lot, and I loved what the conversation you and Jerry had last week, and you were talking about the different way people learn, certainly the work you do every day with your organization. One of the things we were just talking about before we started was the traditional model, and you talked about skills gap last week, and I think it's a great place to sort of kick off, because when we think of traditional models, what was it you said about 2 wrenches and a head, or two
shoulders and a wrench? And so when you're doing lab training and there's 15 people in the room, and we're going over a specific diagnostic.
Yeah.
There's a instructor, there's one person working, and there are 13 people standing around not doing anything.
I'm smelling a very specific person right now, because I know that thing you're talking about. We're all crammed around a furnace. The first 2 are getting it, the next 3 maybe, and the last 4 are checking their phone.
Yeah.
2 shoulders and a wrench, and that really speaks to the traditional model. I think there's probably people this morning who are like, yeah, that's how we do it. What are some of the times that's good? What are some of the ways contractors you see every day? We call it like that hands-on training, which, you know, most of the technicians we speak, just let me touch it, I'll figure it out. But what about, is there ways to learn and to grow without that one-on-one time with a mentor?
Oh, 100%. And in fact, it becomes a responsibility of the technician to set the table for that learning to happen. And by that I mean is if a technician has access at quality training and has the drive to improve their skills, then that training happens all the way through, from home all the way to that lab. That lab is not the end-all be-all to training.
I love what you're saying, and I'm having another flashback to I was a CD-ROM, and it was a basic refrigerant. I remember being at night, booting up the computer, and practicing. And you know, at the Toolshed, one of the things we talk about is focusing what's inside your control. And you shared how many individual technicians you know that have decided that whether they're with a company or whether you're just a single team member, today there's people that are taking control of their training, and that's really step one. You're saying decide for yourself that this is worth it and that you're going to learn.
Yeah, look, and I know that the statistic I threw out last week, and there's about the 350 individuals that have paid out of pocket for their own training. They weren't placed there by their company. 70% being employed, and their motivation being, I just want to be better.
Man, I know our friend Jerry always says, no one should care more about your career than you. Listen, if we're lucky, we're turtles on a fence post. People, God willing, you're at a good spot. You've got people investing either in a company or just a mentor. But really, you're saying step one is take responsibility for yourself, and you've got some great examples. So the other thing you mentioned last week is this idea of a gap analysis, fancy term for like what do you need
Right.
to learn?
Yeah.
Like, what's that about?
So, on an individual level, I have to be realistic with myself. I have to be able to look into myself and say, where am I weak? Where do I need to improve my skills?
Okay.
And sometimes I know those. Sometimes they're evident.
Right.
Sometimes they're not. So I think what it takes is really seeking the resources that will help you ascertain what those gaps are. I mean, clearly at my company, we spend a lot of time talking about assessments.
Yeah.
Because it's really central to being able to provide what we believe the technicians need through all this technology. But if it's not on an individual level, the service managers
that's what I was
also
thinking,
need to know it, or the owners, or whomever that is overseeing the training.
Yeah.
There is so much power in visibility. So for me to stay involved or engaged in training, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to find it interesting, but it's also going to have to be relevant.
Right.
Now, if I've shown an expert knowledge on a certain competency, whether it be in HVAC, plumbing, electrical, or whether it be in anything else I take on in my life, if I've already shown an expert level knowledge in it, why am I going to spend 2 hours relearning everything I already know?
All right, so we got to park here because you're saying so much here. First, we gravitate to what we're comfortable with, and it's easier to like stay in your comfort zone. Jerry always says everything you want is right outside your comfort zone. But I'm also thinking about, and whether you have a team or yourself, you're talking about other ways of identifying gaps. So the first thing I thought of was callbacks. Listen. I remember I was, I must have been like 2 weeks into my on-call journey. I I'd ran a call, and I walk into work in the morning. Everyone's around the dumpster, and I see a group of them, and Bob. If you're watching, I still remember. He goes, "Hey, it's the callback kid," and I was like, "Oh!" And I was so gutted, and I was. I know I couldn't possibly be as sensitive as I look, but I was a little like, oh. And eventually later, right before the meeting ended, he comes to me and goes, "Look, the only person that didn't have a callback was the person that didn't get out of the truck, right?" And so callbacks are a fact of life, but we can use those, right? We can use things that customers say, surveys even, to identify a gap possibly.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There are plenty of metrics that we have out there to measure the effectiveness of training.
Yeah.
Ultimately, from a company standpoint, where's the return come from?
Yeah.
And the lowest hanging fruit, the easiest one to identify is how many non-revenue calls do we have to go on? How many mistakes are we going back to? That's one way to measure it. But there's also measurements of confidence and competency, which are much more difficult to measure because there's not a lot of real hard data around it.
But it's real, right?
But it's a real aspect for sure.
So step one, it starts with us. Step two, identify the gap. Step three, perhaps don't just stay in the things you're already good at. Learn some stuff, and then whether you're a company or more importantly, probably if it's just your own self in a truck, you start to seek the returns on that knowledge. And so I know you're coming back each week, and we'll talk about this. But the old model of certainly two shoulders and a wrench.
Yeah.
Two shoulders and a wrench. I love that, and there's a time for that. But is there a time for what are you seeing with contractors you work? Because I know for me, it was very much a one-to-one relationship. They put you with someone that knew more than you did, and maybe that person was a good trainer, right? Maybe not. Like that's real. Like sometimes the best trainer isn't the person that knows the most.
Right.
What are you seeing as far as individuals or companies using, whether it's technology? We live in, you can find stuff even on Instagram and social media. There's all kinds of. Are you seeing that gap close, Andy?
So this is what we have come to understand.
Yeah.
We have digital first learners. These learners are now digital native. They've grown up with a touchscreen phone in their hand.
Right.
What they are looking for and what we can do better as trainers across the entire industry is instead of cramming the traditional training model down their throat and saying this is how you're going to learn is really listen to them and say, how do you want to learn? And then leveraging the technology to provide it in that manner.
We're gonna have some church up in here because that was the gospel right there. That's the good news. And there's a couple of things, and you know, there's so many places we'll go, but we'll maybe save it for next week. So what I heard you say there is there's new tools out there, and we certainly should. And you know, I'm just past 21. So not quite a digital native. I mean, a little past 21. But even myself, I'm getting more used to looking for those digital resources. And from there, I think probably one of the most important things that you said, I know Jerry and I talk about this a lot, it's, you know, the days of doing things the way you were comfortable doing them and expecting everybody to catch up, that old command control, those days are pretty much gone. We've got a skilled labor gap. Many of our people have a choice of where to work, and we're grateful if people choose to work alongside us. But you really think it's important to learn to provide resources the way that potential student needs to learn?
Look, I think we need to blend models to ultimately have the greatest training outcomes. Right? We want to know what the training outcome, we have training outcomes in mind. How do we most efficiently get there? And it's going to be some visual learning, it's going to be some auditory, but all of it is going to be active.
I love that. That's, there's so much to unpack. So take responsibility, get outside your comfort zone and learn something that you don't know. Do a gap analysis, measure the outcome. And if you're responsible for yourself, or you're responsible for a team. This idea of it's a new day, there's new resources, and you can really blend the approach. And we'll get into the different types of training, but ultimately for one learning lesson, it may be all digital. For another, it may be the two shoulders in a wrench, which is absolutely my new favorite thing. So I think let's pick up the conversation next week, because I think there's so much there that we can park on. Hopefully this morning you've benefited from Brian's experience. Thank you again. I know the entire team at Interplay is you guys are volunteered. You're coming here each week and you're sharing the goodness of your heart. So we really appreciate it. Thanks to Brian. Thanks to our friends at Schedule Engine for making this possible. The wonderful people at Emerson. Remember, the Toolshed is filled with people just like you, coming to make every job just a little bit easier. And if we take the lessons from today, if we measure the outcomes, the future is bright. And so I really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.